queremos ser y debemos ser.
La generación que lidera.
La lucha contra la injusticia y la desigualdad.
Y lo conseguiremos. Con los objetivos del desarrollo sostenible.
Para todos, en todo el país, sin dejar a nadie atrás.
Queremos vivir en un país
que avance en la lucha
contra la pobreza extrema.
Para que nadie, en ningún lugar,
se despierte por la mañana preguntando si hoy habrá algo para comer. Queremos vivir en un país
en el que los servicios de salud
sean un derecho de por vida para todos.
Y en el que ningún niño tenga que morir
por una enfermedad que tiene cura.
Queremos vivir en un país
en el que todos puedan ir a la escuela
y desarrollen las capacidades necesarias
para enfrentar y vivir una vida plena.
Kausaita Munanchis, Hoj Soyupi.
En el que todas las mujeres y niñas
tengan las mismas oportunidades
de progresar
y sentirse seguras y empoderadas.
No podemos lograrlo si se excluye a la mitad de la población.
queremos vivir en un país
en el que todas las personas puedan tener agua limpia
y baños adecuados en la casa, en la escuela y en el trabajo.
Un país en el que haya
energía sostenible para todos,
electricidad y luz en cada hogar.
Queremos vivir en un país
productivo
y que sigue creciendo,
creando trabajo digno para todos.
En un país
en el que nuestras industrias,
nuestra infraestructura y nuestras innovaciones
no solo se desarrollan para generar crecimiento económico,
sino para mejorar nuestras vidas.
Y un país
en el que los prejuicios y las desigualdades extremas
desaparezcan.
En el que la gente viva
en ciudades y comunidades seguras,
resilientes y sostenibles.
Queremos vivir en un país
que estará revirtiendo decididamente la amenaza del cambio climático,
en el que produciendo y consumiendo responsablemente
protegeremos la vida de nuestros mares y océanos.
Y restauraremos los bosques y la tierra misma.
Regenerando vida.
Queremos vivir en un país
en el que haya paz
a todo nivel entre ciudadanos y países,
en el que el gobierno esté al servicio del país.
Justicia,
y en donde trabajaremos juntos.
Con alianzas a todo nivel,
para que estos objetivos mundiales se hagan realidad.
Estos son los objetivos mundiales.
Kaimi, Teximuyuntimpa Yayirikuna. Naciones Unidas Choramuscan, Objetivos de Desarrollo Nisca, Taripanapa.
Pongámonos a trabajar.
Hagámoslo
realidad.
Buenos días a todas y todos, soy Alva. Bienvenidos al segundo día del evento Perú Sostenible en Vivo.
Hola a todos, soy Gianfranco Ferrari y con Tony somos copresidentes del evento de Perú Sostenible. Hoy día nos enfocaremos en 2 P's, personas y paz, y reflexionaremos sobre el acceso a las oportunidades y a servicios básicos, así como la necesidad de construir instituciones más sólidas.
Antes de empezar, vamos a ver un video resumen del día de ayer.
Creemos genuinamente que eventos como este son necesarios para reconstruir la confianza y el vínculo entre la ciudadanía y las instituciones para promover una agenda común.
También queremos reflexionar sobre los dolores comunes del ciudadano como punto de partida para generar diálogo entre actores públicos y privados y para juntos reconstruir la agenda nacional.
Ya los científicos del mundo empezaron a hablar de Climate Endgame. Se acabó el juego. Con esto los quiero dejar con la sensación de pánico. Esto lo tenemos que resolver.
El Foro Económico Mundial cuantificó los servicios naturales alrededor del mundo en algo parecido a los 150 trillones. Y en ese contexto, un país que tiene prácticamente todos los climas del mundo, ¿se podría volver un país competitivo?
Hay sectores que tienen un efecto importante y más directo y también indirecto sobre la biodiversidad. La agricultura, la pesca, el turismo y también el sector extractivo.
So we need to do a lot more, a lot faster, because all countries of the world now have net zero emission plans, and most of them are relying on electricity.
Environmental Performance Index is a global scorecard. It's something that's produced every 2 years by Yale and Columbia universities. It's meant to be a report card almost, so we give grades to countries to let them know how they're doing on achieving sustainability goals.
En el país, 16.6 millones de personas están en situación de inseguridad alimentaria moderada o severa. Tenemos que recurrir a opciones sustitutorias, pero también mejores. ¿Y qué mejor que la economía circular de las industrias pesqueras y acuícolas para poder proveerles estos insumos?
Lo más importante es entender que la construcción sostenible está metida dentro de un sistema y que la verdadera sostenibilidad no se alcanza cuando disectas todas las cosas. Necesitas enfocarte en el sistema entero.
Regenerative Design is taking this concept of how do we think about everything we're doing and shift it from structural extraction, where we're looking at taking resources out of our planet and out of a natural system.
For Peru to survive, it needs to join the bandwagon. It needs to start to think what it means to have this sustainable vision, to move to a circular economy, to make it a more inclusive economic growth. Staying on the sideline is simply not an option.
Tenemos que hacer que las cosas sucedan y desde aquí hago un llamado a todo el empresariado para dejar el discurso de la sostenibilidad por el accionar de la sostenibilidad.
Sin duda, tuvimos un día espectacular ayer viendo la P de Planeta. Hoy, como mencioné hace un rato, hablaremos de Personas y Paz. Y siguiendo con la espectacularidad, vamos a empezar con una speaker, la verdad que espectacular, Joanna Barsh. Ella es socia principal, Emérita y asesora principal de McKinsey & Company, quien nos explicará What the World Needs Now. Seguidamente daremos inicio al panel sobre el ODS 4, Educación de Calidad, donde abordaremos los retos educativos actuales del Perú.
Luego tendremos un break, que esta vez será especial porque tendremos una sesión en vivo, de mindfulness con brisa de Nemostier.
Y finalmente, luego del receso, reflexionaremos en torno a la inclusión financiera para lograr la igualdad de género, los retos de la desnutrición y anemia en Perú y el rol del sector financiero para generar acceso a servicios y oportunidades.
Es un día espectacular, arranquemos.
Durante la mañana, que veremos la P de Personas, el objetivo es mejorar la calidad de vida de todos, tomando como punto de partida la satisfacción de las necesidades básicas para tener una vida digna. Como mencioné hace un minuto, empezaremos con Joanna Barsh. Solamente un tema logístico, este espacio se realizará exclusivamente en inglés. Para las personas en la sala, tenemos los equipos de traducción a la entrada, y para los que nos siguen de forma virtual, tienen la opción de elegir la traducción en español dentro de la plataforma en la ventana del espacio en vivo. Después de la presentación de Joanna, tendremos un espacio para preguntas y respuestas. Con eso, habiendo dicho eso, pasamos al inglés. Joanna, I believe you're there. Yes, you're there. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, Joanna. And now the floor is yours.
Gracias. Hola, todos el gente. And that's the end of my Spanish. What the world needs more of now are more female talent. And I'm going to take you through in 30 minutes how remarkable women lead, why this matters today urgently, and what we can all do to jumpstart our progress. If I speak too quickly, you slow me down, because I'm a New Yorker and I am a fast talker. This is the first part, how remarkable women lead. And you might ask yourself, are all women remarkable? And the answer to that is probably not. But let's look at first how women have been faring. This shows you on the left side, the Fortune 500 women CEOs, and on the right side, the Fortune 500 global women CEOs. And what do we see? That over a long period of time, yes, women have moved all the way up to the very top. And so if you take a long view, you might say, oh, things are going pretty well. But if you look at all the interim steps, you see that it's a fight year after year after year to get incremental progress that to most women and to some men feels very slow. Let's look at this pipeline. This is US companies. There are hundreds of companies in this data. We know that in 2021, which was a COVID year for sure, women were up in the pipeline, and there were a lot of women in the US all the way up in the C-suite. And that's real progress if you compare it to 2015, which was several years before. However, if you look at 2019, the year before COVID really hit us, you can see that there's hardly any progress at all. Which view do you take? Do you take the long view and you see that generational switches are happening? Or do you take the near-term view and realize that without concerted effort, we do not make that progress? I did a lot of research with the support of McKinsey and a team going all the way back to 2004 through the current time. And we interviewed women at the top all over the world, in China and Australia, in South America, in Europe, in the United States and Canada, in Africa. And what we found is that when women rise to the top, they bring capabilities that are needed in a company and pretty damn special. Meaning, everybody talks about purpose today. It's like a buzzword. Women brought it to work before it became that popular, because women wanted to have meaning at work. They certainly have meaning at home, and that's a competition to have something at work in addition to needed pay. When women are beset in the middle of an upset, a challenge, a situation, women turn on questions to learn, to be in a learning mindset. This is very different than what ordinarily happens in an upset where you see fighting and conflict and no movement, no learning. Women bring this special capability. Community. It is researched that women bring more hormone that actually releases good feelings in the middle of upset and create community. Women build trust-based relationships. Men can do that as well. But in particular, more women bring this to the workplace. You know this better than I, that engaged voices at work from women are different than those of men. Women tend to look at what's the world going to be for our children? Are we going to have clean water? Are we going to have good schools? Those voices are needed both in politics and in business. And finally, what we learned is that women bring energy in the form of positive emotion. What does that mean? Love in the workplace. And I do not mean romantic love. I mean friendship, good feeling, joy. The feeling of we can do this is positive emotion, and that creates positive energy. Not all women bring this, for sure. We don't want to get lost in the averages. But these 5 capabilities are extraordinary for leaders. Men can have them too, but women have brought them into the forefront. Okay, on top of those interviews, which were over 200, by the way, we also interviewed men, and we found certain capabilities in common. We did research review across leadership, neuroscience, how our brains work, evolutionary biology, what were we like thousands of years ago, organization behavior, what's happening in your company and why, and positive psychology, the science of happiness, gender studies, of course, as well. We interviewed men and women around the world from small to big companies, and we found that these capabilities actually lead to greater performance, resilience, and a sense of fulfillment for the men and the women who use them. We have taught leadership programs around the world to thousands of men and women, and we have found that these capabilities actually turn you from being a great manager into a great leader. How would you do this? If it's interesting to you and to the women in your company and the men in your company, it starts with self-awareness. We then become a choice. When we make choices that are different from our instinct, if we practice using tools that are widely available, then we actually can also get greater performance. And when we as leaders get greater performance, guess what? Our organizations perform at a higher level. Our organizations become more resilient. And the people inside our organizations feel more fulfilled. That's pretty darn great. And I don't know who wouldn't want that today. Those are the 5 pieces. Meaning, which includes starting from strength, having purpose at work, feeling joy, framing, we talked about upsets, being self-aware in the moment of that upset, the ability to reflect, to pause and adapt, connecting, to build trust and community in your company and in your ecosystem, engaging to hear all your voices, to be able to take risks and act as owners of the company, and energizing. It's not just using energy, it's also recovering energy so we can sustain a very difficult and rocky course, which, as you know, is worse than it ever has been. We have COVID. COVID is never going away. People are dying every day. We have war. We have conflict around the world. It is destabilizing our economies. We have inflation. I know in my country, gas prices and food prices are causing havoc everywhere, and people are worried. Politics is becoming polarized. People are losing confidence. And even, I'm sure you spoke about this, the climate. We can't even talk about the weather because climate change is a tough topic for everybody. Flooding, fires, etc., and work instability. When you look at all of that added together, you need a fundamental shift in leadership. And women can help bring that. So why now? Why now? Let's take a look. Post-COVID. Post-COVID, there was a lot of debate. You read it in the papers, and you saw that people thought men and women losing their jobs was going to be disastrous for women. And it turns out that it's actually not disastrous. Indeed, women have come back. We're on page 11 now. Thank you very much. Women have come back to the workforce, maybe a little bit after men, but it is true that women in certain segments are actually affected very negatively. Young mothers, also people who work in the industries of hospitality and entertainment, as you can imagine, those were shut down for so long. But by and large, women are back at work. In Peru now, that could be a different story. In Peru, you see this incredible rise in the women's participation rate in labor. And then you see it fall off for COVID. So what's going to happen in Peru? We don't have the numbers at this point in time to see, but we know that this has a big effect. We also know that there are societal norms that make it just harder for women to continue to progress. We know in Peru, if you can look at the red, you see 2011, 2012. If you look at the black, you see 2017, 2018. And this is the World's Value Survey that you're looking at. You can see that a lot of people think that men have a greater right to a job than a woman, particularly in tough times such as we're in. A lot of people think that when a mother is working for money, her children are suffering. And a fair number of people also believe that if for a woman to earn more than her husband, this is a problem at home. And you know, these numbers don't look that high until you compare it, let's say, to the US, which is not so great itself, but far better in terms of the changing norms of the society. So where are we? We've made gains and we have much farther to go. In Latin America overall, the McKinsey survey found that 11% of the people at the top are female. Not bad, but could be a lot better given that 50% of the population is female. And in Peru, we found that there are no women at all in about half of the public corporations at the top team. No women at all, not one. So that's something to work from. That's our starting place. Research says that women bring something to the workplace. Here you see my favorite characters, The Incredibles. I hope you've seen that movie. It's a great, great movie. So on the left, you see our man who's applying control and corrective action, terrific in a turnaround, who likes to make decisions individually. And this is all survey-based research. So I'm not giving you my opinion. This is what the researchers found. Men and women together are both pretty good at intellectual stimulation and efficient communication. So what do women bring? Women bring more on the people side. Go figure. Expressing expectations, rewarding success, developing people, role modeling what we want people to be and do, and participative decision-making, which really helps when you don't know what the future holds, which is pretty much where we are right now. Organization health also is improved. McKinsey has this wonderful survey, Organization Health Index. It has nine areas of organization health. And in every single area, when there are 3 or more women at the top, the organization health has improved, which means that we compared it to those organizations without 3 women at the top. Can you imagine that setting direction, coordination, control, work environment, so much better when there are women in leadership? So if you are not convinced by the leadership research, this is the organization research that says employees get it and they like it. In fact, I love this research. 64,000 people around the world determine what they want in leadership back in 2013 when they stopped trusting their leaders, whether that be politics or business, it doesn't matter. Yes, people valued being decisive and resilient and analytic, etc. Those are very masculine archetypal characteristics. I don't make that up. That's what 32,000 people told us. They labeled those characteristics as masculine. But you know what they actually really want? They want people who plan for the future, who are expressive, who are in touch with emotion, have EQ, who are reasonable, loyal, flexible, patient, people who collaborate, who have passion, who are empathic, which means understanding the other, and who work out of selflessness. Those are considered to be female feminine archetypes. So the leader of the future needs both, but you can see how much women bring to the table in general. Again, not all women have these characteristics. Not all men just have the characteristics on the left. We need people with both, and we are needing more women. One more fact, the recent fact to help you as you consider diversity in your organization. During the pandemic, women stepped up more than the men in their companies did. What does that mean? They actually use all of those capabilities we just saw on the prior slide. They provided emotional support a lot more than the men in management. They checked in on everybody and how they were doing. They worried about the workload to balance so that mothers in particular and people who needed to take care of others were able to do so. And they helped their people in multiple ways, more than the men did in your organization. When a company is committed to gender diversity, you also get innovation, you get creativity, you even get growth. These are surveys done in Latin America, and it basically says that employees across the companies that were surveyed believe that when there is a commitment to gender diversity, there's also a huge likeliness to propose new ideas, to use external ideas, to use customer feedback, to share best practices. Everything related to innovation, creativity, and growth gets better at the same time that you commit to gender diversity. Why is that? We don't know. It's not a causation, it's a correlation. But what it suggests to me is that somehow your culture is shifting to be more open and more accepting. And good things happen with that. So let's recap the business case today. You get to double your talent pool. 50% of the graduates coming out of university are female. Who wouldn't want to pick from all the best talent, not just half the best talent? You get to increase diversity of thinking, particularly when you face hard problems. That's been researched. You get better decision-making because it's more collaborative, and that word VUCA, I'm sure, is coming up elsewhere. Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world that we live in, it's not getting better. A lot of you are in businesses where half your customers, or more than half your customers, are female. So who wouldn't want to be able to understand their needs best? And a lot of your people in your company, even at frontline levels, are female. So having role models coming up through the pipeline is really important to show them that they too, if they work hard, can get to the top. It's a great retention tool. It also, as we saw in the Latin America data, creates greater sense of belonging. I'm here, my ideas count, I should raise my voice. And a lot of debate, there is financial upside. Some people would argue that there's huge correlation between diversity and financial performance. I'm married to a scientist, mathematician, so I'm going to tell you that there is a case that some people tell you organization health, the stronger your organization is, the stronger your financial performance is. That's a correlation that cannot be denied. And when you have more women at the top, as you saw earlier, there is in fact greater organization health. So there's a lot of reasons to know that diversity is a good thing to do. So Peruvian leaders, what can we do? What can we do to jumpstart progress, to get it going post-pandemic? Well, let's start with this. What do you see? What do you see? Maybe you're looking at an education barrier. There's just not that many women enrolled in university. Maybe you're saying that your talent pipeline is just devoid of women. Maybe you're thinking about economic inequality because women aren't working, at least for money, at the same levels in Peru that you'd like them to be. There's just so many of them doing unpaid work. And women at large earn less than men, maybe not in your company, but the data shows that nationwide that's the case. We know the pipeline is broken. It's broken in the US. It's broken pretty much everywhere. And we know that society in Peru makes judgments about working mothers. That's been researched and shown that when women become a mother for the first time, a lot of them drop out or take easier jobs or want part-time work. And we know that it's a culture that in general favors men. So is that what you see? We're up against a huge number of barriers. But maybe you see it differently. Maybe you see a glass half full, because there are a lot of women coming out of university pre and post COVID. And those women are employed in the big companies pretty well. If you look, you see that we almost have parity at the very entry management jobs. We know from the pandemic that it's okay to work from home. It's okay to work flexible hours. A lot more flexibility is still okay. We can release some of those constraints when we did not think it was possible. And we know from looking at the world that cultural norms change. Sometimes they change radically when they need to. As we saw in Rwanda, when so many women came into government because of the sadness and tragedy that had happened there. We know it in the United States that the cultural norms do change. And so we know it can happen in Peru. We know you've done phenomenal things. So this is all possible. So it's possible. Let me tell you what to do. And you don't have to take any of this. You can tell me to go home to the US and you'll figure it out yourselves, and that'll be cool too. This is what companies that have already finished and plateaued, this is what they've already done. They have a business case. They have a strategy. Their strategy says, for our business to succeed, to perform at the highest possible level, we need more women. This is what we're going to do. Damn it, it matters to the business. Number two, they have D&I people running around the company. Number three, they look at the data just like you do everywhere. They collect data in granular detail. Number four, they have a sponsorship program. No, that's not just an empty word. They actually help the senior women grow, visibly grow, give them a lot more exposure to the top team, to the board, to the issues the company is facing. They change their policies. It's okay to work part-time in these companies. And they modernize their recruiting. What does that mean? We're all biased. We're all biased. So let's try to take bias out of the system, and out of our websites, out of our marketing materials. Come on, let's not push away the women before they even start. You know what? That's not all they do. They make pledges. You've seen those pledges all over the place. They report to the board. Often they report to the world. They demand that there's at least one candidate who is a woman on every slate. They make that happen. They have employee resource groups, so they help the women help themselves. They have management training for the men, because after all, men are in power. Men have to help women come through that pipeline. And they change the people processes. You know, evaluation, promotion, pay, recruiting. You know what they are. You know what? All of this has to take place. This is just foundational to get gender equity. Sounds like a lot of work. There's more. This is not a simple problem to solve. It is not a linear problem. It's what scientists call a complex systemic issue. And when you have a systemic issue, you just can't use a silver bullet. You need to look at the whole thing and come up with a lot of initiatives. You can't assume that if we plan this correctly, if we just hire the right D&I person and we take a year, we have a strategy, we have a plan, that we're going to win. It doesn't work that way. You'd actually be better off finding out where you want to go in, the pain points, and experimenting and going quickly so that you can see what works and what doesn't work. And instead of saying, I'm going to fire you if you don't get there, instead of that, what are we learning? If you didn't learn anything from that experiment, sure, I'm going to take you and put you somewhere else. But if you learn something from it, we can actually improve. What else? We have to, at the top team, make the commitment real. And you'll hear me say targets, set targets. We may not reach them, but we're going to measure and we're going to hold ourselves to the fire. Feet to the fire, we say in America. We need moments where you go, aha! What is that? Where we just go, I get it now. I get it. How do you create those moments for your top team? Okay, we can actually make this happen. You could take roles and split them so that you have a woman and a man in the role working together, co-COOs, for example. You could take your top team and expand it. Nobody says it can only be your direct reports. You can decide that somebody at the next level down deserves to be on the top team because that person has a different voice. You can have diversity on slates. I've done enough reading of research that's gone on to let you know that one woman on a slate isn't going to work. You're going to need to have more than one, probably 50% of your slate, at least 30% of your slate should be female. And you can go out to another company and hire as you need to. You also need an army. You cannot do it by yourself if you're the CEO or the top team. You need people throughout your organization to want to be like this too. So find those people. They already believe in total talent. They believe in innovation and creativity. They believe in growth. They're great leaders. They help people. You can find them. They are in your company. And then, as we talked about already, you need a management process on the top team. You need to be reporting what's going on. You need to talk about this every week. You need to evaluate the leaders of the organization on gender equity. You need to provide incentives, rewards for people who are getting there, and consequences for people who are not. I believe it all boils down to mindsets. Here I did a few interviews with the help of the kind folks on the stage and some others in Peru. And here's what I learned. These are mindsets that I literally heard in those interviews. We in Peru are always close to crisis. So we start from a place of scarcity. We don't have the money. We don't have the time. The job is stressful because you have to travel for the job. You gotta be in the office. It's long hours. This is not the kind of job that a woman could do, right? This is not the kind of role. This is not the kind of company for a woman. And from the women themselves, will my mother, will my friends still see me as a good mother if I continue to work? So we all have mindsets that limit our ability to thrive. We got to shift those mindsets. Here's just some examples. Can we start with a mindset of abundance? Can we be more flexible because we learned how to do that? Can we, in fact, keep our eye on the total talent pool, not just the one we have? And women, can we imagine ourselves as great mothers and great executives? Shift that mindset and you start to grow like a rocket. Okay, so we're going to need some stuff in the organization. We are going to need the leadership team to be sponsors, and this is what it means. Provide opportunity, provide the resources, make the connections, advocate. We need all managers to listen better, to be more human, less transactional, less robotic, which means we all have to slow down and calm down. We need to build trust. The people processes kind of need to work for women to get ahead. Women are held back in every way imaginable in most companies. And we have to help the women develop by providing opportunities, by providing training, by providing sponsorship, and by hanging on to them case by case. So we're at the hardest part, right? We may still be thinking, you know what, Joanna, that's really nice and you're pretty energetic and I like you, but you know what? We're in a fucking crisis here. We need to be near-term oriented. We need to survive. There's not going to be a long run in Peru without that mentality. And to that, I say, sure, but it's not an either or. So maybe you're thinking, what do you mean? We don't have time. That's a finite resource. We don't have the money. We don't even have the people to do it all. And to that, I hope you'll remember, yes, I'm with you. Our priority must be to survive. And guess what? More women in leadership will help the company succeed. If we start to act now, you have to start now or you never get there. So, top team. If diversity really is a strategic business driver, it should be in your list of initiatives. Ask your full team, is everybody really committed to this? Because obviously we're signing up for some work and we're signing up for some trouble. Are you open to systemic change? There's no silver bullet. Do you have the skills in the organization to experiment, to rapid prototype, to collect data and move on? And I know it's tough. So do you have the courage to find the resources that you will need to take action? Those are your questions, top team. I'm going to switch one more time back to the women, because women in an uneven playing field such as we have, there's still something that you can do. You can still become a remarkable women leader regardless of the environment. When you start, ask yourself, am I working from a core of realizing that I am a strong human being and I have purpose? Am I self-aware of what I do, what limits me? Am I open to learning? Am I willing to shift as I learn what works? Do I have sponsors, the kind that we talked about earlier, ones who will create real opportunity? And if I don't have sponsors, who can help me cultivate them? Am I taking risk? Am I taking on challenge? Because that's the only way to grow and to have greater impact in the company. And am I taking time for myself, particularly if I'm a mother, a wife, a worker, I have a team? Am I also practicing energy recovery? Taking the time, 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon, you can't believe it. I know you believe you don't have the time, but if you take that time, you have more energy for work. So any one of those 10 questions, even one, yes, is a great start. Even one, yes. Use it to fuel change in the company, because we need to put energy in if we want to make this progress happen, and we need to do it now. So thank you. I hope I didn't take the full 30 minutes. I know that you have so many questions for me, and I hope I can answer them, but maybe I can't. In the meanwhile, you can also find me, those of you in the audience, and ask me your questions or tell me that this is all baloney. I want to hear from you. I really care. And now I'm going to come off, stop sharing, so that we can have a real conversation. And excuse my bad language. I really apologize. I get just carried away.
Your excuse. Don't worry, Joanna. Thank you for your presentation. Maybe, Tony, you want to start?
Yes. As I previously mentioned, Joanna, I came across with your book 2 months after being Minister of Finance. And I always thought, why I couldn't read this before that. So for all the females that are here, I really, really recommend How Remarkable Women Lead. This is an amazing tool to support you across your journey in leadership. I think that your speech was fascinating. Here in Latin America, in Peru, the gender issue sometimes is there's a lot of noise with ideology. And the fact that you have been brought here research, evidence, numbers is really, really a very smart discussion and makes the case for thinking in a more smart way on how to involve a woman. I want to first talk about a discussion we were having yesterday with Gianfranco. You mentioned the word target. So sometimes managers, CEOs think about, okay, you know what, if I put a target, for example, if I have to recruit 2 managers or 3 managers, and if I explicitly put a target of, okay, from these 3 managers, I want 1 to be a female, something that they are lowering the standard. Can we discuss a little bit about what do you mean exactly about these targets, not necessarily quotas, about these targets, and about when we think about, okay, let's do a meritocratic recruitment, we think that the field is even, and it is not the case. So can we talk about what do you think when you think about this target, and whether or not this means to lower the standards?
So go back to mindsets of behavior. We all work on automatic. When we go to recruit somebody, we just want to do it quickly. We want somebody who looks just like the guy who was doing it right before, and we always look backwards because we don't think about going forwards in a company. So what do we get? Frankly, we get another guy, probably an older white male, because that's who was doing it before. And it's easier because that's what our network is, and it's faster. When we want to help women progress, because we believe that it's part of our strategy, that diversity is good for the business, we are going to have to take more time because we're looking for a broader talent pool. We may not have the network for it. Even our recruiters may want to do the easy way out, which is to hand the names they already have in the system, who are white men. We have to retrain them to say, no, we're not kidding. We actually think that there are women who are qualified to do this work. So we take the time, we take the education. We also have to open up our own mindsets because we don't want to look backwards. We want to look forwards. What are the skill sets that we're going to need? And we can afford to take somebody who has new skill sets that we're going to need in the future, who may not have some of the experience that we used to need in the past. And then we may also need to support them. Men actually get more support informally than women do at work. It makes sense. Men know more men. They get coached typically by a more senior, older person. And so when they mess up, we all mess up at work now and then, not too much, I hope. We just get help. But the women who mess up, everybody goes, see, see, she does, what is she doing? So you got to take the time. You got to educate. You got to really want this, right? Put support in for it. And those women are going to be every bit as good. A lot of interviewees have told me even better, I hate to say it, but even better than the men, because they have more ambition, more drive, and they will work harder because they understand that they've overcome so many challenges. That's what I mean by doing the work. In a quota system, you would say, just get me the person so I can make my bonus. That's not going to work. You want to see the effort going in to find the person. And then we don't always make our targets, but we have to work towards them and put in meaningful effort. And I believe we will make our targets then because the women are there.
Joanna, we should have had this conversation prior to the discussion we had last night, because it wasn't a discussion among the two of us, but 4 women and me. And I cannot repeat in public the words that were pronounced in that discussion. But in the corporation I lead, we're roughly 40,000 employees. More than half of them are women. But there's that, let's say, 50-50 balance gets up to a point, managerial point, which is highly correlated to a certain age of women, which is highly correlated to maternity. And a maternity, not about 9 months, but I don't know, 10 years, just for the sake of an example. And there's, at that point is where that 50-50 balance is broken. What are your thoughts about maternity and paradigms, not only on men, but on women regarding maternity and the impact on women at work?
You know, I have to slip this in because I think it's very devilish. We did this analysis, Eduardo Bolio and a wonderful team of people, Valentina Ibarra among them, in Mexico, did this analysis of many, many companies, well over 120 companies. And the analysis was about how do who's performing really well on gender progress. So, as you can imagine, they did the McKinsey thing, they split the companies into quintiles. And they looked at the top quintile and the bottom quintile. You know what they found? They found the top quintile did so many things better or just did them. And the bottom quintile did not bother to do them at all. But you know what they also found? And they don't talk about this, but I can say it. 55% of the companies in the top quintile had a woman CEO. So the answer to your question is put a woman in charge and you're going to have policies change, practices change, all kinds of things are going to change, and women are going to move through, and the company's still going to perform well because companies only exist to perform well. So I don't say that you should replace yourself with a woman, but it's an option as you think about it. Meanwhile, I can see you're not laughing, but I think it's interesting that companies with a woman on top change their practices and their policies, and they're okay with that. So think about, as you look at your pipeline, where in the pipeline there is a pain point, meaning the women are falling out, and ask, can we do these jobs on a part-time basis? Can we do these jobs with greater flexibility to work from home? Can we change other constraints in these jobs that are disallowing women? And can we, on a man-to-man, or in this case, woman-to-woman basis, create the role in such a way that the individual talent can thrive through the period that's the toughest? And usually that period is until children are in full-time school. And, it may be that in some roles you cannot do it, but in many roles you can. You probably already hire in other countries and allow them to work for you because you need the talent. You think of it that way. And if this woman is working from home, or this woman is not working the 80 hours a week that we'd like her to work, but she's working 40 hours a week, what can she get done in that period, and how can we use her talent? So let's do that. Let's also think through leave policies. It's not just the children, it's the older. And for the women, we have to think through, and for this you need sponsors, can I still be a good mother? It's a really tough mindset that the women ourselves have. And usually there's nobody in the company saying, yeah, and usually there's not even a mother of that mother saying, I believe in you. Somebody's got to believe in that woman for her to say, I can be a good mother and a good executive. And you might as well start in the business, because the business has an outsized influence on society.
Well, thank you for firing me today.
I'm so sorry.
Joanna, I know you have a couple of conversations with Peruvian actually mothers, which are top-notch executives in the Peruvian business environment. Did you find any specific about Peru or the environment in Peru, or is more general, it's applied the same things that you've seen elsewhere in the world?
So that's what took me, Gianfranco, to the World's Values Survey, which I had really not looked at before. And I know that it was used in other McKinsey diversity research. In Peru, the cultural norms around motherhood are way greater than they are in the United States. I'm sure it was the case at some point in the United States. It was I give you a personal story. I started work in 1981 in New York in a consulting firm, and I had a child in 1991, and the head of the office, being very nice to me, said, I'm sure you won't want to come back to work right away, or maybe ever. And I said, what are you talking about? Of course I want to come back to work. And he said, no, you don't know. You've never been a mother before. You're probably not going to want to come back to work. And I said, oh yeah, but I actually know myself. So we have to be aware that we're not all alike just because we're women. And in Peru, I think that norm affects the men and the women. It affects men saying, I don't want to ask her for the promotion because it means she might have to work differently, or change offices, or work longer hours, or be in the office more. You should ask her, because our cultural norm often holds us back. We don't want to offend the other person. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. It affects how we think about women in roles. Is she too emotional? I love that one. That's a natural question to ask. It turns out there's no research that says that women are more emotional than men. When men are getting angry in a meeting, that's emotion. So tears and anger are the same thing. Women may have tears, but they're probably just really angry at you in that moment. So we need to just question ourselves each time. And I think in Peru, that's going to be even more important. And that's not different than other countries in Latin America, by the way. Peru is not off the charts. So I just think being sensitive to how we see things, and then being willing to question why. Does it need to be that way? Is there a reason for it to continue to be that way? And maybe there is. And if there is a reason, so be it.
Joanna, I have another question. In Peru, we have had 3 female ministers of finance, and 2 out of the 3 were single without kids when we were minister. There is something about the balance in the household work. And I think that in some way structures reinforce the fact that women have a more burden of work. For example, parental leave here, it's 10 days for males and 90 days for females. So in some way, even the legislation is shouting like, okay, you know, guys, if you have a little baby, you can just stay 10 days helping at home. So I was wondering, in your experience, thinking much more about from the policy perspective, have you seen what are your the best practices in policy and legislation to balance a little better the burden of the household work?
So we all know research in every country shows that women do the burden of housework at home. And we know that during COVID, that was even greater. Men took up more housework. Yay for guys. But women took up even more housework. So it didn't equal out. Not that it should have, but it didn't. And I think it's important to recognize that women do work more. They just do, we do more work. So it goes back to mindsets. Most men, and I live with a man who behaves in the same way, believe that it's a zero-sum game. Believe that it's a competition. When it's a competition at work, what that means is you can't take 10 days off because somebody else will get ahead of you. I've been watching Formula One racing. 10 seconds will mean you lose the race. And you know what? There's only one winner. So the winner takes it all. Losers get nothing. So in order for policy to counter what is a very natural and entrenched mindset, you kind of have to enforce and say, you have to stay home. You have to stay home. We're going to dock you. So if you come back to work, you're paying a fine, and the fine is going to hurt. That's the kind of policy that would start to shift for men to say, I'm better off staying home. Of course, they would want to stay home given the choice because they love their family. for sure, but they also want to succeed at work. Once we understand that true motivation, then we change the policy to make it easier to make a good decision there. And for women, 90 days may or may not be the right amount. There was a big race for talent in America where, you know, the big financial centers started to offer more and more and more. And there, you know, 90 days is now the bottom, but America's still not got paid leave for everyone. So we're way behind on, you know, when you look at all the countries of the world. Paid leave is an obvious next step to encourage women. If you want to have a thriving society, you want to have a certain amount of population, and you want working women to feel comfortable having children.
Okay, we're out of time. Thank you, Joanna. Your talk was fascinating. I invite the females especially to review your book and your article. So thank you very much for your time. I really like the fact that you only did a diagnostic, but also provide very, very concrete actions of how CEOs can move forward in this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Good
much.
luck.
Thank you
Good
so much,
luck.
Joanna. Thank you for joining us.
And thank you, and thank you for being a male ally, because as you know, that's one of the strongest levers. You are a sponsor of women. I happen to know that, and I admire you, and I thank you deeply for doing that.
Thank you.
Ahora vamos a pasar al panel del ODS número 4 sobre los retos de la educación en el Perú. También quiero avisar a todos los que nos se unen por internet es que pueden revisar la agenda en cualquier momento ingresando a la plataforma del evento. Ahí encontrarán las sesiones del Día del Planeta en la sección On Demand. En este panel vamos a reflexionar sobre el panorama actual de la educación. Vamos a revisar experiencias en educación básica, técnica y superior y también iniciativas del sector empresarial. Le doy la palabra a Marilú Martens, directora nacional de CARE Perú. Adelante, Marilú.